If you've been following the SoCHiology podcast since I launched it in 2021, you will be aware of the reverse psychology subseries, which is basically unpopular Chicago opinions from Chicago. You will also be aware of the SAT, the SoCHiology awareness test, where I quiz random Chicagoans about different questions in regards to Chicago history and culture. Well, this Black History Month, I'm introducing the ChicaGOATS sub-series. This is basically a Black Chicago history blitz that details and gives brief summaries of different Black Chicagoans that lived in our city and did great things in their respective careers and left a huge impact not on the city but on the entire world. So without further ado, let's get into it. From Harold Washington to Harold's Chicken and everything in between and beyond, this is SoCHiology. The most famous cartoonist in history is Walter Elias Disney, who was born here in Chicago. And for a brief period in my childhood, I too wanted to be an animator and create characters and bring them to life with personality. But I could barely draw stick figures, and that dream didn't last long. But there is another Chicagoan's dream that did come true. This episode is about the cartoonist, the first Black female cartoonist, Jackie Ormes. Born Zelda Maven Jackson on August 1st, 1911 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, her father owned a printing company and was also a movie theater proprietor. She wrote and drew throughout her teenage years and became the editor for her high school yearbook, in which she drew caricatures of her classmates and teachers in it. Around this time, she wrote a letter to the editor of the Pittsburgh Courier, a Black-owned newspaper, to solicit work. And thankfully, the editor wrote her back, and that's when her journalism career got started. Her first comic strip, Torchy Brown, debuted May 1st, 1937. Torchy Brown was about a Mississippi teenage girl that found some fame and fortune singing in the Cotton Club up there in Harlem, New York. This cemented her as the first Black woman with a nationally appearing comic strip because the Courier had 14 city editions across the country. In 1942, that's when she finally moved to Chicago and began writing for the Chicago Defender in conjunction with continued contributions to the Pittsburgh Courier. It was during this period she created a second popular comic strip known as Patty, Joe, and Ginger. Her comic strips weren't just entertainment. Her characters tackled real-life issues like racism, sexism, environmental pollution, and more. She would say, quote, "I have never liked dreamy little women who can't hold their own," end quote. This was a reflection of her real-life activism and humanitarian causes, which she was so vocal about, the FBI opened up a case file on her eventually, which is crazy, right? She retired from cartooning in 1956, but continued to create art in other forms and deeply immersed herself in the culture of the South Side of Chicago, which had been her home since the early 40s until her death. She was also one of the founding directors for the DuSable Museum of African American History in Washington Park. She died on December 26, 1985 in Michael Reese Hospital in the Bronzeville neighborhood at the age of 74. She currently rests at the Hope Cemetery in Salem, Ohio. She was posthumously inducted into the National Association of Black Journalists Hall of Fame in 2014, and there is also a Chicago Housing Authority apartment complex that bears her name. And if you just want to think about how deeply impactful her comic strips were to Black culture, Langston Hughes said this in the Chicago Defender in 1948. Quote, "If I were marooned on a desert island, I would miss Jackie Ormes' cute drawings, nothing else." End quote. If you enjoyed this podcast, I ask for two things and I will love you forever. Number one, please engage with us on social media. So like, share, subscribe, and comment on whatever platform you're listening to it on. And number two, please make sure you pass it on to a friend who will enjoy it as well.